It began with a smile and a handshake. Cameras flashed as Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney rolled out the red carpet for South African President Cyril Ramaphosa at the G7 summit. The words exchanged were warm, diplomatic, and perfectly rehearsed. Phrases like strong ties, mutual respect, and green energy cooperation floated through the air. To the casual observer, it looked like a celebration of friendship between two nations from opposite ends of the world. But beneath the polished sound bites and diplomatic pleasantries lies a far more complicated story, one that speaks to the core of Africa's current global entanglements and the quiet but persistent pursuit of its resources by more powerful states.
Welcome to Canada. Bienvenue au Canada. It is a great honor to have you here. As you know, we've met a bit in the past, and I've been a long admirer of your leadership of South Africa, and now your leadership of the G20. Yes. And the world is very much in your hands at a crucial time. And if I may say, from a Canadian perspective, the strength of the ties between our country are great, including down to the level of assistance in natural disasters. And South Africa has always provided us with support during times of difficulty, including with forest fires. We reciprocate. There's much to be built on together, and I look forward to our discussions.
Well, thank you very much, Prime Minister, for welcoming me and for inviting us to the G7 outreach program. We're really delighted, and we wish you the best of luck as you put together all the ideas and all that to come up with some declaration. And we are also in the same position that you are in as President of the G20. So we've come here to learn how you do it. But we also want to thank you for the continued wonderful bilateral relations between Canada and South Africa. We've had a long relationship, and we're very proud of the way that we deal with each other. We support you with fires, you support us with investments, and you supported our just energy transition, and we're really delighted. So our relations are strong, and we're particularly pleased to be here.
For many Africans, this moment feels all too familiar. Another summit, another round of promises, another smiling photo op. But history has taught us to ask deeper questions. What lies behind the warm welcome? What do partnerships between global North nations and African countries really look like when the cameras are turned off? And most importantly, who truly benefits? Experts and observers from both Africa and the diaspora are divided on what this meeting really signifies. On one hand, optimists argue that Ramaphosa's presence at the G7 summit reflects South Africa's growing influence on the world stage. As the current chair of the G20, Ramaphosa was invited as a key player in shaping global economic policy. Some African analysts see this as a chance for South Africa to advocate for the continent, to push for better trade deals, support for clean energy transition, and a rebalancing of global power dynamics. In this view, Canada's outreach to South Africa is a welcome recognition of Africa's rising stature. However, a growing number of voices remain skeptical, and for good reason. Canada's interest in Africa has always been tightly tied to the continent's rich natural resources. In particular, South Africa's reserves of lithium, gold, platinum, and rare earth minerals are increasingly critical to the global shift toward renewable energy and digital technology. And while Canadian leaders talk about partnership and mutual development, critics point out that these deals often follow the same patterns that have long characterized Africa's exploitation. Investment flows in, extraction begins, profits leave, and the local communities see very little benefit. Take, for instance, the situation in Mali. In recent years, Mali has made headlines by taking bold steps to reclaim control over its natural resources, expelling Canadian and other Western mining interests, and insisting on greater national ownership of its wealth. It was a strong assertion of sovereignty that resonated across the continent. It also shook countries like Canada, who are now seeking more stable partners elsewhere. Enter South Africa. Cyril Ramaphosa, a former businessman and union leader, is no stranger to the world of global finance. He has spent years navigating boardrooms and diplomatic chambers. Some see this as an advantage, a leader who understands how to negotiate on equal terms with Western powers. But others worry that this makes him more likely to prioritize corporate interests over the needs of everyday South Africans. In fact, South Africa is still struggling with many of the same challenges it faced decades ago. Load shedding continues to disrupt daily life and economic productivity. Unemployment remains painfully high, especially among the youth. And despite being Africa's most industrialized economy, it continues to depend heavily on foreign investment, imports, and global capital markets. Critics argue that this dependency is sustained not by accident, but by design. Aid, they point out, often comes with strings attached. Investment is frequently tied to policy reforms that benefit foreign investors. And even so-called green energy partnerships often result in Africa supplying the raw materials, while Western companies design the technology, hold the patents, and reap the profits. In this arrangement, Africa is reduced once again to a source of raw inputs for someone else's prosperity. From Canada's side, Mark Carney is a strategic figure in global finance. As a former governor of the Bank of England and a leading voice in climate finance, Carney has long been involved in shaping economic frameworks that determine how global capital is allocated. His embrace of Ramaphosa could be read as a tactical move, positioning Canada to benefit from South Africa's mineral wealth under the banner of climate cooperation. But is this really a climate partnership or a diplomatic disguise for continued extraction? Some observers in Canada's African diaspora are sounding the alarm. Speaking from a place of both personal experience and national pride, they warn that Canadian diplomacy is often wrapped in politeness and progressive language, but serves clear economic interests. They urge African leaders, particularly those with major resource reserves, to tread carefully, to scrutinize every clause in every contract, and to ensure that deals are structured to empower local communities, build industrial capacity, and preserve sovereignty. Indeed, this moment calls for a sober reassessment of what true partnership looks like. For decades, African nations have accepted foreign aid, loans, and investments in exchange for access to their resources and influence over their policies. But many of these arrangements have done little to transform their economies. They've built mines, pipelines, and ports, but not factories, schools, or research labs. The value addition, the real wealth, has continued to happen elsewhere. If Ramaphosa's government is to change that pattern, it must think long-term. It must insist not just on revenue sharing, but on technology transfer, local manufacturing, and job creation. It must anchor every deal in a broader vision of national development. And above all, it must learn from the past. Countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are beginning to rethink their relationships with foreign powers. They are asserting new terms that reflect dignity, equality, and sovereignty. Of course, no foreign investment is inherently bad. Many African economies do need capital, expertise, and international cooperation to achieve their development goals. But the key is balance and control. Partnerships must be structured in a way that ensures African countries retain ownership of their resources, command over their development strategies, and protection from economic coercion. For the people of South Africa, this means asking hard questions. What exactly is being negotiated in Canada? What role will South African companies and communities play in any upcoming energy or infrastructure projects? How will intellectual property be handled? Who will benefit from the jobs created? And how will this impact South Africa's broader economy, environment, and future? The answers to these questions will shape not just South Africa's future, but the continent's. Because the story unfolding in Ottawa is not just about two countries, It's about a global system that is being challenged, slowly but surely, by a more assertive, united, and self-aware Africa. So while the handshakes are warm and the speeches are polite, African people are watching closely. They know that the real work begins after the cameras are turned off. It begins with accountability, transparency, and courage. And it begins with leaders who are willing to put national interest above personal gain or diplomatic favor. To be fair, it's too early to judge the outcomes of this latest South Africa-Canada engagement. But history offers plenty of reasons to be cautious. And if there's one lesson Africans have learned from centuries of foreign involvement, it's this: never confuse diplomacy with equality, and never confuse investment with empowerment, unless you wrote the terms yourself. We want to thank all our loyal subscribers and supporters of Voice of Africa. Your engagement makes it possible to have these important conversations from an unapologetically African perspective. If you haven't already, please consider liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and turning on the notification bell. Every click, comment, and share helps amplify African voices and bring truth to light. At the end of the day, what Africa needs is not charity, it's justice. Not pity, it's partnership on equal terms. And not endless summits, it's sovereignty. Stay alert, stay informed, and most importantly, stay rooted in the truth. Because no one will protect Africa's interests better than Africans themselves.